How to be prepared if there are increased food shortages. If food shortages get worse or last for a long time, you need to think about how you can change the way your family eats. Instead of buying foods with no nutrition, you should buy foods with the most nutrition for the least amount of money. Buy a little bit more of the things your family eats every time you go shopping. Don't empty shelves. Each part of the country will have different shortages. Stock up on the things that seem to be easier to find. Make your own food. A bag of rice can be used to make many different kinds of meals, but a box of hamburger helper can only be used once. If you can, start a garden right now. This is the best way to add to the food you already have. Don't forget that there are crops that can be grown all year long, even in the north. Basics of stockpiling. Flours, sugar, salt, beans, rice, peanut butter, honey, etc. You can buy canned foods or make your own. Make sure they are foods your family will eat. When it makes sense, you can save a whole lot of dough by buying in bulk. Portion out what you need for the week and save the rest for later. Just don't fall for the bulk deals that end up costing you more money. Use the resources in your area. Farmers markets, bartering groups, and small shops in your area. Avoid big box stores since they are more likely to be short on supplies. If you can, raise chickens because they are a great small livestock investment. Plus, they have a lot of protein. Why being more self-reliant is insurance for your family when there are problems with the supply chain. A lot of people got a rude awakening last year, and unfortunately, many people didn't do so well or are still waiting for things to get back to normal. I don't think we'll be able to get back to normal life before 2020 anytime soon. That's why it's so important to learn from this disaster and make a plan to make sure your family won't be left in need. People shouldn't think of self-reliance as strange or hard. I see it as one of the most fundamental ways to be free and independent, in addition to being another type of insurance. After all, we know what happens when we put too much faith in our fragile food systems and supply chain. It is never too late to take the steps you need to make you and your family more self-sufficient and able to feed yourselves. Watch this video till the end as we will give you practical steps on how to prepare yourself for self-sufficiency. Please leave a like and subscribe to Economic Empires so we can notify you when a new video comes out. Start storing food. We mention this a lot, but it really is important to have a food storage. We think 3 months worth of food for each member of your family is the bare minimum. Also remember that the quality of the food is just as important as the amount. Your family won't eat ramen, but pasta with tomato sauce instead. Have an extra source of water. Water must be stored as a backup. Without a safe source of water, it's hard to cook a meal. Having a backup water supply is critical in the event of a catastrophe or if you live in an area prone to natural disasters like hurricanes or even just bad pipes. Water is the most important resource in a survival situation. It's one of the items on the store shelf that's emptied first during the threat of a natural disaster. Have a backup emergency energy source available. Susan Brennan from Connecticut says, "I've always wanted to get a generator, but I didn't really think about it until we moved to the woods and lost power 4 times in 1 month. I'm looking into a solar generator for sure now. It's fine to store food, but how much will you lose if your freezer stops working?" Solar power is perfect as a backup energy system. You will need the solar panels and a battery storage system. Diesel generators are also an option. However, you will need to pay attention to more details such as storing diesel, regularly servicing the generator, backup of the most important spare parts, etc. Growing a reliable survival garden. I think this is the most important thing you can do to become self-sufficient. especially now that there are food shortages. The biggest factor in how much supply chain disruptions will affect you is whether or not you have a garden or small animals. Tomorrow, you may have to depend on what you can produce in your own backyard to feed your family. A survival garden needs to provide the maximum output for the least amount of input. When life gets tough, it usually translates into having less discretionary time. Good design will help your food system produce well with minimal human input. It is possible that you may not have running water for your survival garden. Carefully plan to raise your crops with a limited water supply. Investigate possible options such as clay, self-watering raised beds, or reusing household gray water. Capture rainwater in barrels to water your tender plants, or better yet, create a series of swales that will water your trees, bushes, and perhaps your garden beds with runoff and keep the precious water on your property. Get to know your neighborhood. I always avoided doing this when I lived in Washington State. Stan from Utah says, but now that I live in a small town in West Virginia, I understand how important community is. It is important to know your neighbors, not just because of security. If you trade goods and skills with your neighbor, supply chain problems won't be that big of a deal. Master an old-fashioned skill. People are learning the value of the skills that their grandparents and great-grandparents knew. Last year, when no one in our area could get bread and yeast was hard to come by, sourdough starter was a very popular search on Google. When things are tough, we encourage people to learn skills like canning, cooking from scratch, crocheting, knitting, woodworking, foraging, fishing, and hunting, to name a few. Get rid of things you don't need. A lot of us depend on things that have no real value in our lives, especially when it comes to making it through a disaster. Think about selling or getting rid of things that take up too much of your time or money, which are two of your most valuable resources. If the idea of becoming self-sufficient sounds expensive, what can you sell that would be better used for the health of your family? You can't eat a PlayStation or iPhone after all. Buy local. Find a local farmer or a butcher through Local Harvest. You might be surprised at how much money you can save by not going to the store. It's so important that we learn from what happened in the past and don't think that it won't happen again, or that things will go back to normal. You can learn from this struggle and become less dependent on the government and our food supply chain. All you need is a little bit of knowledge and a lot of hard work. God bless you and your family. Let us know in the comments below what your plan looks like to become more independent, and please leave us a like and subscribe if you found this video valuable.